Hi everyone, it's Duncan Brody here from Goals and Achievements. Today I'm doing another of my expert interviews. As finance professionals, we have huge potential in my experience, but part of that is our ability to see beyond the numbers. So today it's my real pleasure to be interviewing someone who specialises in seeing beyond the numbers, Susan Nee Creaton. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you very much, Duncan. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
So, Susan, could you maybe start off by telling me a bit about your career and your business for the benefit of people who maybe don't know you?
Sure. Well, madly enough, I suppose, in a way, I wanted to be a PE teacher when I left school.
Okay.
And that didn't quite work out. So I didn't get a place. And I took a year out of school, after school to figure out what to do next. And what I missed most was accountancy. So I decided, okay, no more sports for me. And I headed off and did a degree in commerce. And then I was lucky to get a placement with the big six at the time. And I went down the audit route, studying and working. Came out of contract actually just about 20 years ago now. It was April 2000. And I headed straight off to Australia, which a lot of Irish accountants were doing at the time. And worked there for a health insurance company for about 18 months, which was really, really great, actually. And got back to Ireland after a bit of travel and worked in a hotel group in Ireland, but decided, I had the travel bug. I wanted to do more and see more of the world. And the best way of doing it, I felt, was working. So I volunteered with an Irish international development organisation, humanitarian, called Goal, and found myself in Uganda as a financial controller for 2 years. And then worked with them for a further 2 years as part of a technical team member, the finance representative on the technical team, going in and out of different countries, helping senior management teams with the business model, and also responding to emergencies. So for example, I went to Sri Lanka after the tsunami, and I went to Pakistan after the earthquake in 2005. And after a lot of living out a suitcase and moving around, I felt I wanted a bit of normality in my life again. And I headed back to Europe and got a job as the finance director of finance for the Mines Advisory Group. So that's an NGO that clears landmines and unexploded ordnance around the world. And I was based in Manchester for that. And I did 3.5 years there. It was a fantastic experience, but it took a lot out of me. I got a lot from it as well, but I knew I needed a break. And I suppose this was 2010, and it had been an intense 10 years. So I went back to university and studied political science, I did nationalism and ethnic conflict. So now for something like completely different. And I wanted to move sideways as well, I suppose. I wanted to do more than finance, or be seen as more than finance. But that was difficult. It was quite hard to move sideways. And I did a couple of short-term contract roles in Ireland, but it was 2010, 11. It wasn't great there. Tiger economy was long gone. So actually I took a job, a 3-month contract in Geneva, to do finance with an international organization there. And I left there 6 years later.
Right, okay.
So, but I actually managed to move sideways in that time. I got an opportunity. I only did 7 months in finance out of that 6 years, and I moved sideways. And my last job, I was 3 years as the director of country programs, overseeing 10 different country offices in Africa and Asia, with the country directors reporting into me. Now, they were all very senior in their own right. And so it really became a coaching relationship. And I think that's where then I got the idea to start my own business. So I relocated to the UK and came to Oxford late 2018. Kind of took a year to really think about what I was going to do and what that might look like. And I suppose what I came up with was I'd really like to be able to work with senior finance people and help them maybe with some of the challenges and struggles and pains that I'd encountered in my own career. And to have, if I'd had someone I could bounce stuff off of at some of the times, maybe I would have gotten through it easier or quicker, or just felt a bit of relief, because often no one understood the responsibility that you felt. And I think a lot of us can feel in any job really, but where I'm looking at in finance, you can feel kind of stuck or not heard or maybe misunderstood.
Mhm.
And I suppose now I feel I have a unique perspective from working inside finance and outside of finance, looking in, to be able to help people to kind of to get beyond some of these feelings of feeling stuck and feeling not heard and misunderstood. And I think we often as well hide behind an air in finance of being in control, yet actually underneath we're really not.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe it's easier to open up to the person who knows what it's like. Yeah. And so that's where I am now. And I started Beyond the Numbers just before COVID hit us, but never mind, we're here.
So it's a really interesting career there. I mean, lots of variety, worked internationally. Great, as you say, having done things, operationally too.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a very, very different perspective. I mean, I know one of the things I found, I believe it or not, at the end of June, it will actually be 40 years since I started out in accountancy.
Wow.
I went into accountancy straight from school.
Did you?
So, one of the things I did notice very much was the fact that in finance, you made much a bigger a contribution when you actually were willing to get out there. And also, I resonate with your point. I remember when I worked for one of the big 4 accountancy firms, one of the partners said to me, it was a lonely existence being an FD, and I kind of thought, never really thought about it. And then I became an FD, and I realised exactly what the person was talking about.
It is, isn't it? I mean, I think that was the thing that struck me the most when I took on that role. And I was only 33 as well, so I probably wasn't ready for it, but I also was, because I wanted it.
Yeah.
Wow, I struggled being, and luckily we had a board, and the treasurer was fantastic and a great help. But again, he was a busy person and, not there all the time. And also, you only want the board to know so much. You don't want to know everything that's going on either. And, in a good way,
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So, based on your own experience, why is it important that as finance professionals we see beyond the numbers?
Well, I suppose, I guess it's very basic in a way, isn't it? I think is that, first of all, the numbers are only half the story.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big thing. And I think, if you're in an organization and you don't understand what they're producing or selling or doing, then you don't really know what the numbers are for either, or maybe the best way of presenting them or helping others understand them. So I think that's the first thing really, is that it's like hearing a story without the context. And that actually, until you know what the business is doing, and whether that's you're visiting a manufacturing site, or you're even going to a call center to see how they do things, or you're playing with the product, whatever it might be, to really understand the business, you have to go outside of just thinking about the numbers side. And when the numbers come to life, because they do when you get both sides, it makes it much easier, I think. And also you can talk to people better. So that would be my first kind of reason, I think. Then the next one is actually, so many people are afraid of numbers and intimidated. I can't imagine, people are scared of working with finance or intimidated. And we're probably feeling the same. We're been intimidated in the roles they're in, and then no one's talking to anyone.
Yeah.
But I was reading during the week that countless studies apparently show that 10% of the population can't do simple percentages.
Right.
And then a significant higher percentage can't do probabilities. So if you think about that, and people sending their kids to school want them to be better with words than with numbers. And so that's really interesting, I think. So even from the beginning, we look at words and numbers differently. And I think people bring that to the workplace. So you get people coming in who are afraid, but they'll never admit it. And then they become defensive, and it makes it difficult to break down that barrier then. So I think it's kind of taking away that fear, and allowing yourself to be able to speak not in jargon, and to be able to speak plain and simple, like we're having a conversation today, just a conversation.
Yeah.
And no accruals, no prepayments, no cash flow, just really plain, simple language that anyone can understand without patronizing, of course. Like, it's not about that either. It's about helping people feel comfortable. And I suppose maybe the last reason, I think, is actually that you're part of something bigger. Mm-hmm. If you're not just sitting in your finance room and looking at Excel or whatever, or systems, that if you're part of the organization proper, then you know somebody in every department or several people, and they don't just call you Duncan from accounts or Susan from finance. You're Susan or Duncan who works at. And I think that's important as well as part of your identity, to be more than just that person.
Yeah, and I guess a lot more fulfilling as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Absolutely. I mean, that's it, isn't it? When you're part of something, you understand the full context, and you can contribute in a meeting to any part of the discussion.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I do think you're right. I mean, obviously in your career, you've been in roles where I guess you've had to really get involved in everything, but I'm guessing particularly when you're working overseas for charities.
Absolutely. And I think that was maybe that started it for me as well, because when I headed off to Africa first, I had no idea I didn't even know if they'd have a computer, kind of, because it was 2003, and like we barely had email and stuff ourselves at that point, which is hard to believe now, but it was still. And when I arrived there, we didn't even have like internet in the office. We had a dial-up modem system, and I often had to go to the local internet cafe to send my accounts back to Dublin at month end, which of course would mean sitting there for 3 hours, kind of while a file loaded up and loaded out the other side, which seems crazy now, but. There I had to speak very, very, first of all, like everybody else is speaking, English is not their first language, which really helps you to slow down and to become a lot more comprehensible. But also we were dealing, I suppose, in cash with real life situations as well. And things become very different when you actually deal with cash, when you physically count money out and get a different appreciation for everything you're dealing with. But also people were doing, we were building things, we were doing construction work, we were doing projects with kids, we were doing all sorts of different things around the place. And what I found first was the accounts would come in from the different regional offices, and it was just a cash book, on Excel. And there would be like the date, the transaction number, the amount. But there was never a description for what it was for. And I was like, it might say something, the account code, or the account code would give you an indication. But I was like, but how do I know if this is bricks for the hospital, or bricks for the, the school, or bricks for the latrines? And the guys in the accounts team were like, oh, well, we just, we decide. And I was like, no, you can't do that. We need to understand. We need to help these people budget better, and, and all of that. And so really you built it from the ground up. And a lot of people complained because they had to start coding things differently and telling. But eventually they also found it easier because we all related to one another better. And they knew that we cared actually about what they were doing.
Yes.
And that makes a difference too, doesn't it?
Oh, it makes a huge difference. And I do think sometimes just being visible in a business can make a huge difference in my experience. I think what happens is you mentioned Excel, I think that our finance people can become a slave to Excel. I was never a great Excel person. You know, I started with A3 analysis paper and corrections loads. So I was never an Excel person. In fact, I used to be a bit of a standing joke amongst people I work with in terms of my Excel ability, and it's not improved, and I've got no desire to improve it either. So so I think it, as you say, you know, I mean, I think if you can actually, it does demonstrate, doesn't it? If you trying to improve the record keeping, to not for the sake of keep improving the record keeping, but for them to help the people make better use of the money they've got available, or better understand the information they've got, or make better decisions, then it's a win-win, isn't it?
It is. And I have a really, actually, when this story came into my head, we were in Sri Lanka after the tsunami. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was really intense there, and there was lots of stuff going on. And there was we had quite a few volunteers who were first timers from Ireland and other countries as well. But there was this elderly guy. He was well in his 60s. Of course, isn't elderly anymore now to me, but you know, he was, and he had come overseas, and they were all spending money, and they were not nobody was doing anything wrong, but they weren't accounting for it and everything. And I came in and I kind of stopped everything, and I was like, right, no one's getting money now until I know what you want it for, and you've accounted back for your last float. So you have to clear the last before you get another one. Anyway, after a week, so first of all, this guy came in and he was like, do you want me to just make it up? And I was like, no, I don't want you to make it up. I want you to tell me, you know. But after about a week, he comes back into me and he says, you know, Susan, if I were 40 years younger now, I'd ask you to marry me. I said, what makes you think I'd want to marry you? And he said, oh no, he said, it's not that. He said, I just want you to know that you've made my life so much easier. Yeah. Because I'm not worried now about how much money I have to account for and how to do it. You actually showed me, you know, what to request and how to send it back. And I was not sleeping at night because, you know, and I found that fascinating. He never let on before, but actually it was afterwards he was able to admit, you know what, this has made a difference. And yeah.
And you know what, sometimes I think we forget, don't we? It's the small things that do make a difference.
It is because it's very easy to kind of nod that you understand something when you don't. Mm-hmm. And then it's harder to come back and admit you didn't when you've kind of played along all along. And that's why I always try and speak as plainly as possible to people. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so obviously lots of benefits of finance people seen beyond the numbers. Why is it such a struggle for finance professionals?
I don't actually know that it is a struggle.
Right.
I wonder, do we even really take time to think about it? So maybe, like, in a way, because we're so immersed in the beginning, you know, you go to university or straight in out of school, whatever it is, and you work, usually you start off at the ground level, don't you, no matter where you go. So you're immersed with people who are only talking finance because nobody's going to let you out into the business at that stage, probably. And, you know, even coming from university, you're surrounded by people who spoke about the same thing. So I think you take for granted what you know. Mm-hmm. And you don't actually realize that the rest of the world doesn't know what an accrual is or a prepayment or understand the difference between cash flow and profit. You know, and I think you take that for granted as if it's like the 1, 2, 3s.
Yeah.
And so I think it takes you a while maybe to understand that that's not the case, that not everybody thinks like that or understands it. And so when you ask someone to fill in a timesheet or an expense form or whatever it is, you don't really see it from their perspective.
Yes.
You think it's straightforward. Mm-hmm. And you can't. And then I think when they don't do it right, you're going, like, what the hell is wrong with this person? Like, this is so easy. And I think that, and I don't think we do that out of malice or, you know, we never set out to go to confuse people or make it difficult for them. I think we just sometimes forget that not everyone is as numerous and as comfortable as we are.
Yeah, and I think as you say, there's a really important point there about the ability to step into other people's shoes and see things through their lens, because let's be brutally honest. As finance professionals, the last thing we want is to have a situation whereby everybody becomes brilliant at finance. That's our specialism. We don't ask finance to go and fix the computers when they break down. Why should we ask somebody in IT to become an expert in finance?
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, I mean that's true. And it does happen as well. If you sometimes give a lot of information, they can think they're experts, which is like the other side of it. But that's not really. But I wonder if another reason, Duncan, is that we feel a bit intimidated or afraid. Because we don't understand perhaps what's going on. We see, there's finance can often be kind of the back of the office in a room detached from everyone else, with our heads down, we're working, and you will come out of that and everybody else looks like, they're kind of really doing stuff and you don't really know what it is. And maybe we feel a bit like, oh, I don't really know how to talk to that person. They're so popular, or they're always really busy and I don't want to bother them. I think there's an element of that as well. If you haven't put the work into building relationships with people, it's very hard to sit down with them when you have to then. I think that's it as well, because if everybody's under pressure and there's no relationship there, then it's very difficult to move things along smoothly.
Yeah, no, very much so. And I think that kind of one of my kind of stock thoughts when I worked in finance was you've got to actually build the relationships ahead of when you need them. Because there is going to be the times where there's going to have to be those difficult conversations. There is going to be those times when you have to say, you know what, I know this is administratively a nightmare, but there's reasons why we have to do this. So, I think that whole thing about seeing relationships and building relationships as being part and parcel of your role is absolutely vital. And I guess because you went into the big six, and I spent some time actually, 15 years into my career in the big four as it was then, to the big four, you really kind of, the whole philosophy is built on the relationship, isn't it?
It is. But I suppose as well, the thing there maybe, well, certainly training, they were all very short term.
Yeah.
As well. And I think, actually we would have repeat. So you would go into the same client year after year. And yes, of course, if you had a relationship, but often people were transient as well. People were moving around, But I think in a workplace, you can work in the same place. Some people do it all their careers, not as much now, but you can still be somewhere for 3 to 5 years. And that's a long time if you don't have relationships with people.
Yeah, definitely.
And okay, there's one other thing though, as well, Duncan, is I think we become victims ourselves of our busyness and our deadlines and our pressure. And I think we often have good intentions of setting out to get to understand the business better or build relationships, but the deadlines get in the way. And I think because we are so deadline focused, that we then find it very hard to let that slip or slide, or, we feel everything has to be put into that, when actually sometimes it's really important to just block out an hour. Even if you said every week on a Wednesday, I'm going to go for lunch with someone, or I'm going to do something. I think that's the thing as well. It's about balancing the priorities a bit better, and that can be a struggle.
Yeah, no, I very much so. And I think that, there is this whole thing about task. And when I speak to people, one of the things I often say to people is, one of the most underexploited things that for people, not just in finance, is actually using shadowing. So actually just spending a day working alongside someone. So I worked in the National Health Service for about 15 years in my career. And I was a mentor for the National Finance Training Scheme, NHS National Finance Training Scheme. So, your kind of top talent coming in who were training to be accountants. And the first place I used to send them out to when they came to join was to spend a day with the porters. because
Fantastic.
reporters knew absolutely everything.
Everything.
And they knew about places in the hospital that most people didn't even know existed.
Yeah. They knew all the deep, dark secrets of the
Exactly. So I think there is something about, just going out there and saying, well, actually, you know what, just doing some shadowing can be an absolutely fantastic thing.
Yeah. No. Totally brilliant. Yeah. Cool.
All right. So if people want to start seeing beyond the numbers, what's some of the key contributors or building blocks that they need to focus on?
Yeah. Well, I suppose, it certainly isn't rocket science anyway. That's the good news. It might be a little bit uncomfortable at times.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like to think of it like this, that actually I used to do CrossFit. Well, I still do it, but when I was in Geneva, the club there, they had a sign over the door that said, it never gets easier, you just get stronger. Mm. And I think it is like that, is actually, things don't change. It never gets easier to start a relationship or to build one, but you get better. Because the more practice you have, you find it that bit easier every time. And, the first time you go to a networking event or whatever, and you walk in the door and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
You kind of always feel a bit like that, I think. But you know that you've been fine every other time. And, those little bits of building blocks like we're talking about now, that's what it is. It's you just get better. So I think people and relationships are the key. That's definitely the key. But out of that, it's not just about building relationships. It's about what you want out of that or what you're putting into it. And I think one of the things is being curious.
Yeah.
So, it's a really good thing to be curious about other people, to have conversations that are beyond the numbers, to be curious about their lives, their job, everything. So that you build a better picture of the person you're working with. And then the ability to listen. That is key, I think. It's that kind of, and it's not listening to respond, because oftentimes when somebody comes in, they just want to rant. They just want to get something off their chest, and it might be that they hate finance and they can't understand this, and they're not looking for you to solve a problem. They're just looking to let off steam. And then you can kind of let it go and then maybe say, okay, is there anything I can help you with now? Whatever. And I think that's it as well. It's knowing that you don't have to solve everything the minute somebody comes in. Because I think we're natural, maybe it's not natural, but problem solving is kind of in our DNA. Yeah. And we always feel, I have to help this person do something. But sometimes, you just need to listen.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, often I say to people, one of the challenges for us as finance professionals is to avoid offering solutions all the time as the only solution. So often I say to people, frame it in the context of, we've been thinking in finance about these three, about this problem. We've come up with 3 options. I'm sure there are many more.
Yeah.
And then it kind of opens up the space, doesn't it, for people?
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And I think, in a way, because we're deadline focused and busy, we kind of go, okay, actually, that's the best thing to do. Let's just do that. But you lose people just like that. And I suppose none of us want to be told what to do. We all want to feel like we've got a part in building the solution.
Yes.
And often you can present it anyway, and they'll probably end up with one of the ones you put forward.
Yes.
But it's giving people buy-in, isn't it? Or allowing people buy-in.
Yeah, and encouraging a bit of engagement, isn't it? And not spoon feeding people, because I mean, my philosophy of finance is one that says at the end of the day, the financial performance or the financial results you present merely tell you what is or isn't happening in the business in a common currency called money.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's okay. So, what were some of the obstacles you faced in your career when it came to seeing beyond the numbers, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I suppose in a way I think I've always had a bit of a natural curiosity. I think my listening skills got better over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the, I, I think I always saw beyond the numbers. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I feel. And I think Uganda, like we talked about earlier, helped me a bit. And I remember being in the first, I ran a workshop for finance for non-finance people, and they were all sub-grantees. So they were all getting money from us through sub-grants. And that would have been anything from maybe $25,000 up to $200,000 kind of. And so we brought in all the heads of the different organizations to do a non-finance, or for finance for non-finance people.
Mm-hmm.
And I started the day by asking them all what their fears and expectations were. And one guy says to me, complex calculations and technical jargon. And I said, don't worry, there'll be none of that here. And actually, and there wasn't. And I think, so I think I was lucky in that regard, that I enjoy helping people understand complex things and making it simple. But my issue often was the other side, Duncan, was being seen beyond the numbers, I think. Because that's also, we do a lot to try and see beyond, but sometimes no matter what you do, others don't see you. Mm-hmm. And I struggled a little bit more with that. Or they only see you as finance. Mm-hmm. And for example, I was at a work conference, and there was networking and all of that going on, and we'd been flown overseas. There was maybe 8 of us in a delegation, and we'd gone overseas to do this. And we had a briefing, and the head of business development said, "Oh, you don't need to be here, Susan, because you're finance. No one's going to want to talk to you." And you're like, "Oh my God." Mm-hmm. And that wasn't about me. That was about him and his view of finance. But it took me a long time to understand that, I think, and to not take things personally like that. Yeah. And so that was one of the things I had to overcome. And I also realized that, well, I needed to build that relationship better. Yeah. It wasn't that he could see that I could probably do more than finance, but he wasn't interested for whatever reason. So I needed to figure out how to get that to work. And I suppose moving out of finance was an interesting thing as well, because, I spent 7 months working for this organization, and then I got an opportunity to move sideways, and I took it. Now, a lot of people were upset because, "Oh, well, you're in finance. What would you know about managing a project?" And there was a project that was falling really behind and was in trouble. And they were looking for someone. In a way, it was a hospital pass. That's what I was given. I think I was thrown something that no one thought anyone could solve. Mm-hmm. But of course, I mean, you're good at managing deadlines. I was good with people, and that was it. And I turned the project around, got it up and running, and it got where it needed to go. And by the end of that, people had forgotten I was ever in finance. Yeah. And it's really interesting. And, within 3 years of being in that organization, then, I was promoted again. But in that time, people coming in, no one ever said, well, Susan came from finance, or Susan was in finance. So it's very interesting how, it's important to remember who you are and what you want to do. And I think, for me, it was being seen as more than just the numbers person.
Yeah, and I think as finance people, I think we're if you think about the breadth and depth of what we actually study in professional qualifications, more so now than in maybe when I qualified. But even then, I qualified with SEMA, and even then they had quite a business orientated syllabus. But certainly, what I notice is that, people don't necessarily know the range of things that you actually cover in professional studies. So unless you tell them, because at the end of the day, a project is a big process. I mean, at the end of the day, and actually as finance people, that's exactly what we're great at. We're great at putting structure, we're great at putting systems, steps. We love it, don't we? It's plenty of strengths.
Yeah, and deadlines. I don't
Yes.
think anyone takes deadlines as seriously as
No.
finance do. They actually mean something, like
Yeah.
really mean something to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think about our big cycles, I mean, our budget cycles, our annual account cycles, they're all basically projects, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing, Duncan, as well, is that when you work in finance, you're really in the engine room of the business.
Yes.
So you build that up over the years as well, because you'll
Yeah.
have done your time in accounts payable, accounts receivable. You kind of work throughout the whole thing. So by the time you get up higher, you've taken on so much knowledge of how a business operates.
Yeah.
And I think, we do ourselves a disservice by not letting other people see that.
Yeah, and you know what, I think sometimes as well, particularly as you become more senior in finance, it's important to kind of let people see, and that you can do the basics. You may not have done it brilliantly. And I can recall a situation. I was working in an organisation. We had real cash challenges. That would be the polite way of putting it.
Oh, there's
And
nothing worse.
and we had a situation where we all of a sudden we got some access to some resource, so we were able to clear a batch of suppliers, but we had a time frame to do it in. And I went to the accounts payable manager and said, we've got basically 24 hours to do it, and said, no, it's a 3-day job. I said, no, what we'll do is we'll throw every person at it. And I said, I'll come in at 7:00 and I'll start off on the thing. Well, it took me 45 minutes to actually process the first invoice. Because I'd been, when I worked in accounts payable, when you managed to orders and invoices with this high-tech device, it was called a stapler.
I remember those days too.
Yeah. and it took 45 minutes, and the whole accounts payable function was in uproar and laughter at how long it had taken me. So the thing was going to take 4 days actually was done in the morning, because I had got in there and made a bit of fool of myself, and I think that was like all thinking, right, okay, yeah, okay,
we'll show you.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so 3 top tips for finance professionals looking to see beyond the numbers. What would be your top 3?
So I suppose first one is understand the business and show interest in people and the relationships and all of that. I mean, yeah, and we've talked enough about that. Yeah. So I think definitely number 1. 2 is finance is a service provider. And behave like that. I mean, I think that's really important, is that the rest of the business is your customer. And just like I walk into a shop and I expect good customer service, so should anyone coming to me. And whether that's, if people are complaining these forms, they're too difficult or they can't, then figure out really what it is that's stopping them or prohibiting them and make it easier. And I think that's really important, that finance is a service provider to the business. And I think the last tip is really no assumptions. Yeah. Don't assume anything, because oftentimes it's never ever about what it looks like it's about. So even when somebody complains about, this form, I don't know, it drives me nuts, it's probably not about the form at all. It's probably about that they had to do something else that morning and now they have a deadline, and they want to let the form fall to the bottom because they think it's least important or whatever. So I think it's always trying to help people from not from assuming what's wrong with them. Yeah, or what's bothering them. Yeah. So they're probably my 3. Yeah.
Okay. So Susan, you've shared a whole bunch of kind of great stories, great insights. I'm sure people watching this will really enjoy it and get a lot of value. If people want to learn more about you, your work and your business, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, so I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Duncan, and that's
where we met. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think LinkedIn is fantastic. There's some great value to be had. So I'm always happy to accept requests from anyone at all.
Yep.
And then also I have my own website,
Yes.
like everybody else.
Yep.
But yeah, I have my own website, which is beyond-thenumbers.com.
Beyond-thenumbers.com.
Yeah. But all the details are in LinkedIn anyway.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah.
Okay, well, Susan, thank you very much for your time, your contributions, your enthusiasm, your energy. Some great stories, lots of learning in the stories too. So thanks for taking the time to do the interview.
Oh, that was so enjoyable, Duncan. Thank you for having me on.
Have a great day, Susan.
Yeah, you too. Take care now.